If that van disappears tomorrow, Mason has no home, no job, and no way back. Mason is a close friend of mine, and I know he is not lazy. He does whatever he can to survive, but he keeps choosing fixes that pull him in deeper. Honestly, the scariest part is not the debt. It is that he still believes everything is under control. Before everything fell apart, Mason had a pretty normal life. He worked in customer support for a pet insurance company. He had a small apartment, a steady paycheck, and a few $1,000s saved. He was not rich, but he had enough to get by. The problem was Mason thought that stability would just stick around. He did not protect it with a budget, an emergency fund, or a backup plan. Then Mason's body started having problems. His back hurt, and his wrist got weak. The physical side jobs he used to do were no longer easy, but Mason had not fully lost his ability to work. He could still do office work, data entry, customer support, or paperwork. Here's the hard part to hear. He should have changed direction sooner, but he kept waiting to get healthy again. And time does not wait for anyone. When Mason was laid off, he did not collapse right away. The company gave him enough severance to get by for over a month. That only worked if he tightened his spending. But Mason kept his old habits. He paid for subscriptions, ate out, and bought things for the van. Then he told himself he was just stressed. I made this same mistake after losing a contract once. Money in the bank does not mean you are still okay. It is just extra time you bought. When Mason could no longer afford rent, he moved into his rough converted van. To his friends, he called it freedom. He said it was cheaper and closer to nature. But if you looked closer, it was different. The van had a bed, a small kitchen, and a few charging panels, but it had no stable address. It had no reliable place to shower, and it did not have internet good enough for remote job interviews. I am not judging van life. Some people do it in a very organized way. But for Mason, this was not a carefully prepared choice. It was an emergency with a nicer name. The van is not just a vehicle. It is Mason's home, his storage unit, and the place where he sleeps. It is also how he gets to his pet-sitting jobs. But he still owes nearly $26,000 on that van, and the monthly payment is far too heavy for his current income. This is where it gets dangerous. If he falls behind, the lender does not care where Mason lives. To them, it is collateral. I once saw a friend lose his car after 2 months of being short on money, and his life got messy right away. Mason is standing dangerously close to that edge too. After that, Mason bought a camping membership for a place to park the van. That gave him electricity, water, and a shower. At first, it sounded reasonable. That made sense, since he no longer had an apartment. But the problem was in the contract. Mason did not understand the interest rate. He did not know the real fees. And he was not sure how to get out if he needed to. He called it cheap rent. But it was really just conditional access to basic utilities. I understand why Mason needed it. But something that helps you survive this month can still trap you in debt for years. Mason is not someone without skills. He used to work in customer support. He handled pet insurance files, scheduling, data entry, and tense customers. Those skills are marketable. But Mason's resume was a mess. Too many jobs, too many hobbies, and too many lines about personal values. Employers do not need to read his life manifesto. They need to see what he can handle, fast, and with very little risk. Mason only wanted remote work. He said it was because of his health. Also, his dog could not be left alone for long, and he could not stand managers breathing down his neck. I understood those reasons, but the market does not get easier because of them. Remote work is fiercely competitive now. Employers may get hundreds of resumes for one role. If your internet is weak, you are already at a disadvantage. If your resume is unclear, it gets even worse. If your daily routine is unstable, you hurt your chances from round one. Mason says he cannot have a direct boss. But honestly, that line does not sound right. Nobody likes being managed in a way that controls every minute. And neither do I. But that does not mean we can live without being accountable to anyone. If you are a freelancer, clients still judge your work. If you are a pet sitter, dog owners still decide whether to hire you again. If you borrow money, the bank still has a payment schedule. Mason does not hate bosses. He is afraid of being watched, corrected, and reminded he is not good enough yet. Mason's dog is family, and I do not take that lightly. His dog has separation anxiety, so Mason cannot leave the van for too long. But this is exactly why he turns down many in-person jobs. Even though he needs money urgently, here is the very hard part to say. Loving a pet is not just keeping it by your side. It also means asking whether you have enough money. That includes enough time and a stable place to care for it properly. Mason always says he is trying. And yes, he does apply for jobs. He messages pet-sitting clients and posts that he is looking for work. But there is a big difference between being busy and making progress. If you use the wrong resume to apply to 100 places, that is not a strategy. If he takes a job without counting gas, time, and platform fees, he may not profit. Trying hard without measuring results only burns you out faster. Small expenses are what worry me most about Mason. An app that costs a few dollars, coffee from a shop, fast food, van accessories, dog toys, cloud storage, and random membership fees. None of them looks big enough on its own to ruin his life, but together they eat into gas, insurance, his phone bill, and the van payment. When you are unemployed, every dollar needs a clear job. If it does not have one, it is stealing your survival time. During a talk with a financial counselor, Mason got tense. That happened when the counselor asked him a hard question. Did he really want to fix his life? Or did he just want others to admit his situation was hard? Mason reacted right away. He said they did not understand van life. They did not understand his illness, his dog, or the job market. It sounded familiar to me. When someone touches a weak spot, we all want to defend ourselves. But if every sentence is an excuse, there is no room left for a solution. At one point, Mason stood up and asked to step outside, not because he could not hear another person, but because he was hearing too much at once. Money, the van, where to sleep, the dog, health, work, and pride. All of it was put on the table in just a few minutes. His hands shook, his face turned red, and his breathing got short. I did not see that as weakness. I saw a man who had been dodging things for too long. And then the truth finally caught up with him. When Mason walked out of the room, I finally understood what scared him most. It was not just the fear of being poor. He was afraid of being seen as a man who had lost control of his life. In America, many men grow up believing they must handle things alone. They think they must have a job, a car, and an answer for everything. But Mason had no answer at that moment. He only had explanations. And explanations do not pay the bills. A little later, Mason came back. He was still tense, but his eyes looked a little different. He was no longer trying to win every sentence. He sat down and asked very quietly what he should do first. That question sounded simple, but for Mason, it was a big step. For the first time in that talk, he was not fighting to protect his ego. He started making room for a real plan. The first step was not selling the van or applying to 200 more jobs. Mason needed to know exactly how much money he had left and who he owed. Within 72 hours, he had to write down every account balance. He had to list due dates, interest rates, late fees, gas, food, and phone costs. Then, he had to call the van lender and ask about a hardship program. He also had to request the membership contract. Then, he needed to read every charge again. I also told him to cancel anything that would not keep him alive for 30 days. If Mason does not know the real numbers, he is only guessing, and guessing does not save anyone. For the next 30 days, Mason had to prioritize cash, not the perfect job. He needed to rebuild his resume into 3 separate versions, one for customer support, one for admin data entry, and one for pet-related work. Each version should keep only the experience that fits that role. At the same time, Mason had to take jobs that brought in fast cash. That meant pet sitting near where he parked the van. It also meant answering messages for small shops, scheduling, and data entry. He could also help with pet insurance claims. I told him straight, if a job is not exciting but pays on time, consider it. When you are burning through money, your ego cannot be in the driver's seat. If Mason has income again, the first step is not upgrading the van. It is also not rewarding himself for getting through a hard time. He has to reduce survival risk first. His money needs to follow a very clear order: basic food, gas, car insurance, phone, internet, and a safe parking spot. Then, the van loan, and only then, high-interest debt. I want him to build a small emergency fund. Even $500 at first would help. That may sound small, but for someone on the edge, $500 can keep the van payment current, or it can help pay for one urgent repair. During these 90 days, Mason has to stop adding things. He has to stop adding responsibilities. And he has to stop buying peace of mind with borrowed money. Over the next year, Mason does not have to give up van life. But if he wants to live that way, he has to make it a real system. He needs a legal mailing address, reliable internet, and a safe place to park. He needs a clear routine for showers and laundry. He also needs clean tax records, and his income must be steady enough to avoid gambling every month. His dog needs its own plan too. He cannot let caring for the dog ruin his ability to work. I told Mason that living differently is not wrong, but the more different your life is, the more carefully you have to plan. If you fear losing your van every month, that is not freedom yet. Mason did not need to win the argument that day. He needed a conversation hard enough to stop defending himself. When he left, he still had debt, the van, and no stable job. But one thing had changed. He no longer called every dangerous choice necessary. I think that was the real first step. It was not grand, and it was not neat. It was just a man starting to see his life through real numbers.